Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Stacia Gar about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts in organizations and how they are utilizing technology. Stacia Gar, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have this conversation. You are involved in some really interesting research in a really interesting space, something that I'm very passionate about myself. You do a lot of work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, particularly within the technology market. So that's going to be the focus of our conversation today. As we get launched, though, before we really jump into the conversation, I wanted to share your bio with everyone. Stacia Gar is co-founder and principal analyst at Red Thread Research. She's a thought leader on talent management, leadership, diversity and inclusion, people analytics, and HR technology. A frequent speaker and writer, her work has been featured in Fortune, Forbes, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, as well as in numerous HR trade publications. Stacia co-founded Red Thread Research in 2018 after leading talent and workforce research for 8 years at Burson by Deloitte. Before Burson, she spent nearly 5 years conducting research and creating learning content for the Corporate Leadership Council, and she has an MBA from the University of California, Berkeley, a master's degree from the London School of Economics, and undergraduate degrees from Randolph-Macon Women's College. Such a pleasure to have you. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today and share all of your insights and expertise with my listeners. Welcome to the podcast. And anything else that you would like to share by way of background or personal context before we really launch into the conversation?
Well, no, I'm not sure I expect you to read the whole thing, so I'm sure people know a lot more about me. But no, I'm just delighted to be here and speaking about this really important topic today. So thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And yeah, you have quite the career trajectory. You've been involved in the research space for a really long time. As a scholar practitioner myself, I'm a professor. I do consulting on the side, and so I can really appreciate the amount of time and effort and work that goes into good data collection, good analysis, and then finding ways to effectively communicate that back to stakeholders and organizational leaders in a way that it's usable, right? That they can actually act upon it. And I think in the consulting world, there's long been a history of data analysis and research reports. Sometimes where the gap has existed is just in that application, so you don't get this really cool report with all this interesting, compelling data, and then you have a short meeting about it, you talk about it, and then you put it on the shelf and you don't think about it. And unfortunately, that's what many organizations in the past have done. Part of the reason why I have you on the podcast today is so we can share with listeners across industries who lead in different types of organizations on what this might mean for them, and hopefully get the thought process going in the process of implementing some actionable items even within their own organization. So as we launch in, tell us a little bit more about the background to this research that you're doing in the DE&I space, and then we can get into more of the findings.
Yeah, sure. So I had begun researching diversity and inclusion actually when I was back at Deloitte, and was leading our research at Burson on, things like diversity and inclusion maturity model. What does that look like? How should we be thinking about this whole space? And one of the things that was most interesting at that time when I was doing the work, it was, I think, 2013, was I would ask practitioners, I'd say, we'd go through all these great things they were doing, and I'd say, okay, well, you know, tell me about the technology that you're using to enable this. And I would get crickets, just like, what are you talking about? And in every other area of research I had done, there was always some tech aspect, whether it's performance management or successions or hypos, all these other spaces, but there was just nothing, except for people would say, well, do you mean e-learning content? And I was like, well, not exactly, or do you mean making content accessible on the computer for people? And I'm like, that's important, but no, that's not really what I'm going for. So anyway, so I kind of set that to the side and said, that's interesting. Like, it's interesting there's this gap, but we went on and we wrote our reports and did the rest of that. And then as it turned out, I was out on maternity leave in 2017. And, there's nothing like sleep deprivation combined with like an active mind to kind of make you go a little crazy. But I was, kind of toward the end of that, starting to look around and being like, what's going to come next? Like, what's the next thing? And it was right at the time that Me Too was really taking off. And I started, I had maybe a little bit more extra time to scroll on my phone than I had before. And I was, just looking, I was like, you know what? I think D&I tech is a thing. I think it's going to be something that's important. Um, Kind of fast forward a little bit of time, for various reasons, decided to leave and start Red Thread with my co-founder, Danny Johnson. And because of kind of that experience of reflection in that time I'd had a little bit away from things, I felt like this is a thing. So we began, it was actually the first piece of research that we did with Red Thread, and we began it actually in a partnership with Mercer, which was really nice, particularly being a new firm at that time, kind of getting started. And we went out, and I thought that we'd find, I don't know, 30 companies that were maybe doing this. And by the time we finished that first piece of research, which ultimately published in the final version, published in January 2019, in that study, we had 105 vendors. And then contrast, fast forward to now, 2 years later after that one published, and we're all the way up at 196. So, kind of that I feel like it's been a real journey with this work. That first piece in 2019 was pretty groundbreaking in saying that this is a market. And now, as we reflect on what we've learned here in just the last 2 years, it is even more so of a market and has just gained incredible steam, particularly after the events of last summer.
Excellent. I really appreciate that background and the origins of the firm and your background in the research. So in this DE&I and belonging space and the HR tech components, what did you find in looking at these vendors and what they're doing or where the gaps are? I'm just really curious about some of those key findings that came out of that.
Yeah, so I think, for those who kind of don't, maybe haven't spent any time with this space and are like, what even is this? I think the first thing to know about this space is one, it's not like some of the others where there's just a single vertical, right? There's not just one area of focus. And so I think, we see D&I technology going across the entire talent life cycle. And so there are different things that can apply to different areas. But fundamentally, what is it? We define it as enterprise software that provides insights or alters processes or practices at the individual or organizational level in support of organizations becoming more diverse, equitable, inclusive, and fostering belonging. And so, back to my earlier point about when people are like, is it e-learning? Is it, I think the key difference is that it provides insights or alters processes or practices. That's the thing that this does. And so we see it within talent acquisition, we see it within development and advancement, we see it with retention, we see it specifically with analytics. The other way to kind of think about this market is that we see three types of vendors. One are what we call D&I focused vendors. So those are vendors who only focus on including enhancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So that might be a vendor who just looks at pay equity analysis, just just to pick one. Another type of vendor is what we call a feature vendor. So that's a vendor whose primary business is something else, but they have added a capability that focuses on DEIB that is kind of its own feature set. They go to market with it. It's a core part of what they do. So an example of that might be Workday, who recently launched a Vibe index. Vibe stands for Valuing, Inclusion, Belonging, and Equity. So that Workday obviously does a whole bunch of other things, but this is a thing for them. The third type of vendor is a DEIB friendly vendor. And so the idea is that they focus on something else. They may kind of have some marketing around DEIB, but it's not really a thing for them. But as a result of some of the things that they do, there could be DEIB benefits. So think about talent acquisition software that may reduce bias as a result of, having an algorithm that does the first round of assessing potential candidates. There's a whole conversation on algorithms and bias, but just for the sake of this discussion, that's kind of what it is. So I want to kind of set that stage before I go into some of these details of what we found, because I think without that, it's a little bit harder to kind of get your head around. But I'll pause there. Any questions on that?
No, that's great. I really appreciate that bit of an overview. And so then the devil's in the details. Like, what did you find?
Yeah, so a few things from the last study. One, this is, I think, important kind of getting the context that I started with, in that we're looking at the first study with Me Too. And that is that we've seen a real shift overall in the market and in practitioners' focus from focus on gender to a focus on ethnicity. Race and ethnicity, excuse me, largely as a result of what we saw last summer, and that's fueling a lot of the energy overall within this space. A second thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is that we've seen just a really significant number of vendors come into this space. So 2 years ago when we published, it was 105. Now it's 196. So it's just a substantial increase. The other thing is that we saw almost a flip when I mentioned those feature vendors and those friendly vendors. So the number of friendly vendors has gone down dramatically, while the number of feature vendors has gone up substantially. And what that means is that a lot of vendors said, hey, DEIB is really important. We need to add in a DEIB feature to our offering. Another key finding was that people analytics for DEIB has really arrived. There have been a number of reasons that have maybe resulted in vendors focusing just on compliance, so EEOC compliance, representation numbers, and the like. But that has shifted, and I believe there are a number of reasons for that. One is the overall rise in the people analytics and people analytics tech space. Also, though, I think that leaders are seeing that the potential reputational risk of not understanding DEIB is greater than the potential legal risk, which may have kept them from doing this analysis. And so that has also fueled this focus. And then the fifth finding we had, which was heartening, was that when we did the study in 2019, a lot of the customers were really smaller customers, and that's typical of a new market. You have smaller companies who are willing to try new things, and they're willing to innovate and willing to take on more risks and the like. We didn't necessarily see a large number of our biggest companies in the market, but what we did see was more of those companies who are in kind of the 10,000 to 25,000 range becoming customers of these vendors. And so what that says to me is that this is starting to normalize a lot more, and we're starting to see these customers see value in what these vendors potentially offer.
I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, Bluer Than Indigo Leadership: The Journey of Becoming a Truly Remarkable Leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There's no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of our problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations.
That's super fascinating. And I'm curious, what surprised you the most as you're looking through all of this? And I mean, in addition, you already kind of mentioned the growth, right? I think that was a big surprise. What else stuck out to you in terms of what you didn't expect?
Yeah, I thought that we were going to see more large vendors, large customers of vendors. Like it's nice to see that group of 10 to 25%, but it wasn't hugely dramatic. It was I don't have the number actually right in front of me, but it was something like 10% increase of that type of vendor, and then the commensurate decrease in the smallest ones. But given how Me Too kind of lit the world on fire, given that we've known that our largest organizations still have such challenges, and the fact that, if you look at something like Edelman's Trust Barometer, we know that the largest organizations are the ones that the public distrusts the most to actually do things right when it comes to social justice. Um, I would have hoped, or I did hope, and was surprised not to see a larger percentage of the biggest organizations starting to buy this tech, because they're the ones who have the scale, and the whole, obviously the whole thing with tech is it scales, and so they have the ones who have the most to gain, and yet they were the least, uh, we saw the lowest change. We actually saw no change in the percentage of those customers in the market. So that was surprising, and I think a little bit disheartening. My hope, though, is particularly after we heard all of the kind of public stands that were made after the last June, and then we know that there's going to be a real push for accountability here in 2021. My hope is that those folks are like literally calling these vendors now and saying, how can you help me? How can you help me respond to the CEO saying we have to share this? And the SEC is now requiring that reporting on human capital metrics. So how can you help me as it relates to DEIB to say something that's meaningful that will fulfill that obligation? So that's my hope, but it was an unfortunate surprise, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a good, reasonable hope. And so I am curious, what have you seen companies doing in terms of these new offerings, these new technologies, to deliver better on their diversity commitments, both internally for external reporting, for the PR element, for all of that? How are they leveraging these technologies?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that we all have to remember is that practices and changes precede numbers by usually at least a couple of years, right? And so we're going to see folks investing in these technologies and making practice changes, and we're probably realistically not going to see the results till 2023. And that's really hard to say, particularly for organizations that live quarter by quarter, but that's the reality with a lot of this stuff, because you're not only dealing with necessarily a diversity challenge in terms of getting more diverse voices and backgrounds and people into the organization, but you're also dealing with an inclusion, equity, and belonging challenge, and that is fundamentally a culture challenge, and we all know that culture takes a long time to change. So I'm not trying to dodge your your
No, no, no,
question,
no.
but I think that's an important thing to remember.
No, that is. And a lot of what you've been talking about, which I really, really appreciate, is the connection of belonging and the culture of inclusion and belonging to diversity and equity. So a lot of times we talk about DE and I, and the belonging piece is kind of left off.
Yeah.
And why is that so important? Like, why do organizational leaders need to have that on the forefront of their mind? Why does that matter? And why have we seen that evolution in the DE and I space?
Yeah, it's funny because we actually, as I think you see from the report, we stuck all four together, Like, because there's some people who are talking about DEI, there's people talking about DIBS, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and we think that all of them have value and importance, and so we have just put the acronym together. But why is it important? It's important because if people don't have that sense of belonging and connection to the organization, some of those other well, really all those other elements are hard to achieve. And so, equity is kind of about ensuring the equitable access to opportunities, and so that doesn't mean equal. It's different, obviously. Diversity. I think we have a decent sense on that, and then inclusion kind of is that idea that everyone feels that they have. That they're connected to the organization, but belonging is different. It's not just that I'm connected, but it's that this is my place. This is somewhere that I am, kind of have that deeper emotional connection to. And so these three things, they're interrelated, but they're or four things, excuse me, interrelated but different. But I think they're all important to creating these cultures and these environments where each of them can thrive.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And ultimately, I think while diversity and equity are super important, if that's where we stop, I'm not sure it really matters much. Like getting a more diverse workforce does have value in and of itself, but in terms of leveraging the value of diversity and equity, that does the leveraging of that value and then really allowing individuals perhaps from underrepresented populations, who are now being included because of those efforts. That's wonderful. If we're trying to empower them and help them achieve their potential, that will then also help the organization achieve its potential. That doesn't happen until we get to that culture piece of inclusion and belonging. And you can conceivably have a diverse workforce without having an inclusive workforce or a sense of belonging where people actually feel like they have a safe place to contribute and be their authentic self. And I think that without that, we're at least not maximizing the potential of what we have there.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think, I know I didn't intentionally dodge your question about what companies are doing. I think that point is actually where there's some of the greatest opportunity with the technology, around this idea of, diversity is easier to measure, but um, inclusion and belonging, that I would say we've seen a really big change in the last couple of years in our ability to use technology, one, to help us to measure it, but also to help us understand it, and then increasingly, particularly in this more remote world, to use technology to promote it. So on the measurement, for just to give an example, we're seeing a lot more belonging and inclusion indices, many of them being offered by the existing employee engagement providers, but recognizing that it's not the same thing as engagement. It often actually is a strong driver, particularly belonging, of engagement, but it's not the same. But we're seeing kind of those indices coming out. We're also seeing things like using organizational network analysis to understand how people are connected to one another and which groups maybe are at the fringes of networks, and whether or not that has something to do with their diversity status. And if that's the case, then intentionally designing interventions which can help connect those people more thoroughly into the network in a way that certainly will benefit them professionally, but also will benefit the whole organization because their voices will be heard much better. Um, and then I think, kind of the final piece here is around starting to think through how can we use our technology in our remote environments potentially differently? Because we know that, like, for instance, back to the network piece, we know that people have become more siloed during the pandemic, because they're primarily, there isn't that bumping into somebody in the hallway. There's, intentional Zoom meetings, and that's different. And so we're starting to see people, think about using different online platforms within organizations differently, maybe bringing in recognition programs that encourage more connection between different groups and the like. So I think that this is an area that we're starting to see take off as people are thinking through, okay, like, even though this started with the pandemic, more remote work is not going to end with the pandemic. And so how do we make sure that that is reinforcing in a good way the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging goals that we have in an organization, as opposed to allowing it to decrease our effectiveness at reaching them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Stacia, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. The time has flown by. We're almost to the end of our time together, though I know we could dig a whole lot deeper and continue. Perhaps I could have you back on in the future and we could continue the conversation. But before we close today, I did want to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, how they can find out more about your organization, more about your recent research, and see, how you might be able to help them.
Yeah, definitely. So we are at www.redthreadresearch.com. We are a membership organization, so that means that folks can join the membership and get access to the research. Though we do have quite a few things that are available for free on the site. And I would say there's a number of research organizations certainly in the space. I would say that where we are focused is really on the most cutting edge practices and trying to solve what we call near future problems. So that is our big focus. We don't, we're probably not going to write your report on the nuts and bolts of succession management, but on, how we should be rethinking career mobility in the era of the pandemic. That is the sort of stuff we're doing actually, and that we'll be publishing in a couple of weeks. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come on and share what we're doing, and would love to connect with anybody. You can find me on LinkedIn, Stacia Sharman-Gar, and I'm also on Twitter, which is @StaciaGar.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Stacia. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. And I look forward to having you back in the future so we can continue the conversation. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Stacia and her company can do for you, find out how you can leverage their research, and start to think along the lines of what you can do within your own organization around these diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts, and how you're utilizing technology. And as always, I hope everyone within this pandemic environment can stay healthy and safe. I hope you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership. Ordinary, everyday actions that produce extraordinary results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life.
Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.